At this time, I want to introduce and bring to the stage the first of our two speakers today. And the first one is Mr. Gary Anderson. He's the founder of the Read to Them company and the One District, One Book program. He's coming to us today from Virginia Beach, Virginia. He has 42 years of experience in public education as a science teacher and a school psychologist and a family. He founded the Read to Them company as a family literacy organization, and he works with hundreds and hundreds of schools across the United States and Canada. He's been married for 42 years, and he's a father of 4 children, grandfather of 12. A little interesting note about him is he's competed in, just in the last decade, he's competed and finished 4 full Ironman races. So kind of a different individual, kind of a different cat, if you will. We're happy to have him here with us today. As you know, literacy is a huge issue for us. The better that our kids read, the better that they're going to do in life. And that's really what we're after. It's our goal to make this One District, One Book program a true, not just school district event this year, but a community-wide event that really highlights and emphasizes and celebrates literacy. So if you would, with your applause, let's welcome Mr. Gary Anderson.
Well, I can see y'all are a creative group. So let's do 2 stomps, and then a raspberry, and then a big stretch, and then sit down, okay? Ready? 1, 2. Now 1 big stretch. Stand up. Yeah. Yeah, everybody likes to stretch. That was interesting doing your applause. It was interesting after following the 2 applause. This has been a wonderful time. I think Brad is wrong. He's a great public speaker. And you know, the thing listening to this that came to mind, I talk about major on the majors, minor on the minors. And the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And here, loving children, Brad gets up here and says, love your students and make them feel special. I mean, that is wonderful. That's the main thing. That's why we're here, and all these new teachers, you know, hearing their vision to make a difference and to love their kids. That's just great stuff. Change is in the air in Great Bend. If you will, Great Bend is taking the bend in the road less taken. Change is happening, and it's about massive parental involvement. I love seeing Humphrey. He ran off with my water. And I was thinking that because I get dry mouth when I talk. Humphrey took my water. Here I invited him to Great Bend, and he took my water. In any case, change is happening here, and I would like to give you kind of a background to that change. Y'all are so far ahead of the curve. Your committee, yesterday morning, I spoke in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And the reason I spoke I was speaking in Lake Hamilton, Arkansas, and I got a call Friday. Today is Thursday? Yeah, it's been on the road. So last Friday I got a call from assistant superintendent in Hot Springs, and she said, we want to do your program. I said, what? She said, yeah, we want to do it, and we want to start it in September, and we'd like you to come speak at our opening exercise. So I said, I'm in, because the program is so simple to institute, but to pull in the whole community. So anyway, I spoke at their opening assembly yesterday morning, and she got the bug and went to her superintendent and started working one district, one book on Friday, and now they're instituting it. So you're so far ahead of the curve. And your superintendent, Brad Reed, is the one who has initiated this whole thing. You know, the change that's happening, and it is a change, because more and more parents are going to get involved. You have a great system here. Great Bend, you're appropriately named. And listening to it, it's just wonderful. This is my 43rd year starting in public education. And I remember when I was a new teacher. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you a story how, as a new teacher, you could do things back in the 70s that you can't do today. You know, with students, you can get involved in their lives. What is the inspiration for this whole thing? I'm a school psychologist, and I've been doing that for about 35 years. And what I hear from y'all, and interesting enough, I work with the elementary teachers. Let me see your hands. So elementary teachers, thank you. Then I work with the middle school teachers, 2 hands. Okay. And then I work with the high school teachers, 2 hands and stand up. Yeah. Nice, a wave. It was a wave. So I worked my first job as a school psychologist. I worked in 2 rural counties, and I was hired. I was the only school psychologist, and I tested some children as before they entered school, in preschool, in 1st grade. And then back in the day, you came back and you did a full evaluation in 3 years. So in the 3rd grade, I tested them. And then you come back and you do another evaluation in the 6th grade, and then in 9th grade. You usually don't do one when they're seniors. But I was the only school psychologist, and there were little elementary schools, and so I followed kids, hundreds of kids, from when they started school and all the way through elementary school, because I was the only one hanging around as far as seeing them. And then when they go to the middle school, I'd see them up there. They call me Mr. A. I introduce them, and I still get middle schoolers. I work in North Carolina now, and they say, "Hey, Mr. A, remember me?" And I tell them, when you see me, say, "I'm Betty," because I always forget their names. And so I watched hundreds of children. So school psychologist is a unique position. It's the only position that follows all these children all the way through school. And I also raised 4 children. So I went home every day to 3 boys, and then we had a little girl. And so I also, during my early years, worked with children in school, but I also raised children. And it was a different ball game. What I came to find out is that there were a number of students that, like Brad was talking about, the hard work of teaching. When you see a student not successful in school, all kinds of bells and whistles. What can you do? You see a child who's actually, we've all seen them, they're falling a little bit through the cracks. I'm going to read a story about Billy Goldman, William Goldman. He wrote the... Is this working? Let me see here. Well, I probably need some technical help. See if I can get this thing. But I'm going to read to you why I get this thing. And it could be me, I go to different ones. But while I get this thing going, or they help me, I'm going to read you about Billy Goldman. And he writes eloquently about some of those students who fall through the cracks. He does a much better job. He wrote the screenplay to The Princess Bride. There he is. Perfect. That was easy. Okay. Thanks. Do I have to point at this? Okay, I'm a little technologically. Billy says, William Goldman says, this is my favorite book in all the world, though I have never read it. How is such a thing possible? I'll do my best to explain. As a child, I had simply no interest in books. I hated reading. I was very bad at it, and besides, how could you take the time to read when there were games that shrieked for playing? Basketball, baseball, football. I could never get enough. I wasn't even good at them, but give me a football and an empty playground, and I could invent last-second triumphs that would bring tears to your eyes. School was torture. Ms. Roginski, who was my teacher for the 3rd through the 5th grade back in the day, would have meeting after meeting with my mother. I don't feel Billy is perhaps extending himself quite as much as he might. Or most often, I don't know, Ms. Goldman, what are we going to do about Billy? Billy says, what are we going to do about Billy? That was the phrase that haunted me the first 10 years. I pretended not to care, but secretly I was petrified. Everyone, everything was passing me by. I seemed busy, but I suppose, if pressed, I might have admitted that for all my frenzy, I was very much alone. As a school psychologist, I get teachers come to me all the time and say, what am I going to do about Alonzo? What am I going to do about Steve? We've tried everything, and nothing seems to work. How can I turn that around? In Billy's case, he got pneumonia in the 5th grade. And pneumonia today is not what it once was, especially when I had it. 10 days or so in the hospital and then home for a long recuperating period. I guess it was 3 more weeks in bed, a month maybe. No energy, no gains even. I was just this lump going through a strength gathering period. That's how you should think of me when I came upon The Princess Bride. It was my first night home, drained, still one sick cookie. My father came in. I thought to say goodnight, but he sat on the end of the bed. Chapter 1, The Bride. Night after night, he read The Bride to Billy. Who can know when this world is going to change? Who can tell before it happens that every prior experience, all the years, were a preparation for nothing? Picture this now, an all but exhausted young boy fighting against sleep, and nothing between them but the words of another alien, painfully translated from native sounds to foreign. Who could suspect that in the morning a different child would awake? I remember for myself only trying to beat back fatigue. Even a week later, I was not aware of what had begun that night, the doors that were slamming shut, while other doors slid into the clear. Perhaps I should have at least known something, but maybe not. Who can sense revelation in the wind? What happens with this? I got hooked on a story. For the first time in my life, I became actively interested in a book. Me, the sportsman addict, me, the game freak, me, the only 10-year-old boy in Illinois with a hate-on for the alphabet, wanted to know what happened next. That Billy speaks for so many kids. I would say thousands of the students that have been referred to me. And I evaluate students and put them in special education, but nothing really changes. They don't have the dad, family. It goes back to family. They don't have the dad or the mom that'll sit there and read a book to them. But he got hooked on a story, and you're going to see this happen all over Great Bend. It really should be called One District, One Story. And this story is going to be about Humphrey. This little guy, and you've already been introducing, we have Humphrey in English and we have Humphrey in Spanish. And I understand some of your schools have a majority of ESL students. So what it does, it connects your whole community. And what happens after the first year or two? Children fall in love with stories, and they want story after story. I'm going to tell you a story. This is a story about when I first started teaching like the new teachers. I first started in York County, and I had many students that came to me, and they were all geared for success. Their parents were college graduates, and they came in my classroom, and I was new to education. And they did well. They did everything I told them. And they scored very well on tests. But I had another group of students. They came in the classroom, and I was teaching over here. They hired me to teach science. I was going to teach science come hell or high water. You know, I was going to teach, and I had the book, and I was going to teach. And so I was teaching. I noticed a whole group of students. They usually sat in the back. Not saying anything about y'all. But they would sit in the back, but I would say study for this test, and I'd get the test and get a 30. And then I'd keep them after school when I'd talk with them, and they weren't into science. They weren't into science. You know, they had disengaged from their academics. I did things like I went on, in the York River was near us, and I got a 50-gallon aquarium. And I kept that in the back of the classroom, and I had these minnows because we were close to Chesapeake Bay. And so if the class did well, we would stun a minnow and put him in the tank, and a oyster toad or something would come up and grab him, and those kids would hoot and holler. I did too. I'll do things to get them interested. But I tried to get these three guys, they represent a whole group, hundreds, really thousands of students that I've been involved with. And I try to get them really to get back into, do well in school, but they weren't interested. You know, they were really more of the teachers, and I was a student. I thought I was supposed to teach them, but they were teaching me. You see, all three of those students were raised in homes that were on or below the poverty level. They didn't have things. Sylvester in the middle, he had never been to the mall. The mall is 12 miles from his house. One of them told me if he didn't come back to school and after Christmas break, and I got in touch with him and I said, you know, it's 3 days, Christmas is over, how come you haven't been to school? And he said, I didn't get anything new for Christmas. So I picked him up, went to J.C. Penney's. I saw Penney's down here. I haven't seen Penney's in years. So I took him to J.C. Penney's, which is my favorite place. I mean, my mother, anyway, that's another thing. So I took him to J.C. Penney's and bought a shirt and a pair of pants and came to school the next day. But he couldn't come to school unless he had on something new he gotten for Christmas. You know, they taught me a lot about, and so, one of the things that we had really in common, we fervently loved our families. For some reason, I had this strange idea that I had the greatest family in the world. Do any of y'all have that idea? Yeah. I think most everybody does. Everybody does. No matter how tentative or whatever, everybody thinks they're family when you're a kid because you're in those wonder years. You remember those wonder years when you go to school and you were just discovering life and you were just in wonder what's going to happen next? They were great. It's a great time. Anyway, I became very frustrated because they weren't into science. So finally, I said, let's go fishing. My dad lived, not me. My dad lived on Chesapeake Bay, and so he had a boat. So I asked, they'd never been fishing before. I don't know if they could swim or not, to be honest with you. But I had plenty of life jackets. So I took them fishing. I told them to be safe. Alvester was the biggest bully in the school. I guess that's why I went after him. You know, he rang my bells in class. I'd send him to the office. You know, they wouldn't know what to do with him. He wouldn't do his work. And so he was a challenge. Y'all like challenges? I guess that's, you know, Brad said I do these Ironman. And I like it because it's a challenge, you know. But, so anyway, we went fishing the next day and we caught fish. We had a ball. You know, I remember baiting hooks and laughing. We had a great time. And those kids, they tried as hard as they could, and they all passed my science class. You know, I'm not saying they did any better, but they passed. So, anyway, here's the real story. 15 years later, I'm at a football game in York County. I'm up in the stands, and I see this lady, and she sees me up in the stands, and she starts coming at me and saying, Mr. A, Mr. A. Of course, she's 35 years old now. You know, she's a mother, whatever. So she's running, and she comes up to me and says, I'm Betty Jean, you remember me. And you know what I did? I lied. I bold-faced lied. Yes, Betty Jean, how have you been? I had no idea who that woman was. But after she went on and told me about what she was doing, which I didn't listen to at all, I said, Alvester, have you ever heard anything about Alvester? This is 15 years later. She said, I saw Alvester. I said, no way. When did you see him? I saw him this summer. And I was like, it just didn't seem to coordinate. Where'd you see him? She said, I was going to the York River post office, which is right on the York River. I glanced to the pier on the back of the post office, and there was Alvester sitting in a chair fishing. You know, I teared up. Tear up now. If you invest in them, like Brad's talking about, it comes back. It doesn't necessarily come back, you know, that year. It doesn't necessarily come back in 5 years, but somehow it does come back. And that was a moment for me. Hearing that, I had a 2-second glance of Alvester. I never heard anything about him, and yet he's fishing on the back of that post office. So that was a moment for me in my whole education career. So I went home and I told my wife, hey, I found out about Alvester, because she had heard a lot about Alvester. She was a teacher too. We love to talk about kids. And she said, Gary, you made me take a picture because you caught fish. I said, no way. She said, I think I still have that picture. I said, really? She said, yes. There he is. That was that picture, and I was a first-year teacher. And we had caught fish. And that's a life-changing smile on Alvester in the middle. You can see he's the one with all the patches. In any case, I found out that if you invest in them and care about them, it'll come back to you. So that started a journey. Remember I told you I worked in that school system, small school system? And what I found out about those guys is that I call them third grade slide outs. That they're full of energy, excitement through the second grade. In third grade, they start hitting that wall. Brad talked about it a little bit, and the hard work begins. And those students start sliding out a little bit. And by the time they're in the 6th grade, they got a chip on their shoulder. They don't go quietly, a lot of them. Alvester, when I started working with him, he was a bad kid. I'm not telling you. I'm telling you the truth. I didn't. So when they get to the 9th grade, I don't know if you have many here, but the neat thing about Great Bend, you have a wonderful school system here in the top 10% in the state, and you are the model for the state in taking family literacy to a different level. And you'll find out when everybody, our One District, One Book program is every elementary family in your whole district, K through 6, gets a copy of the same book, and then you do a school assembly like this, in which you kick off the book. And Brad will read the first chapter of the book and video stream it into all the schools that are participating. And then the children take the book home, and then the parents read the first chapter. And everybody's doing it. Thousands of families, I guess a couple thousand families in Great Bend. And so there is a momentum about it. And children talk about the book. And I'll get to that. So it's very exciting to see, and it really should be called One District, One Story, because this is a story, just like Billy Goldman. It's the story that captivates us, that you want to find out what the next story is. So I watched this, and then in 1995, up to then, I was just testing kids, putting them in special education, raising my own children. I couldn't figure out this conundrum, how to stop the Alvesters and the Tom Dooleys and Stevies from sliding out of education. I saw them slide out all the time. Actually, I would read about them in the paper, you know, getting in trouble, getting in drugs. I don't know if you have much, but you see them, once they start sliding out, it's hard to turn around. So I began, until 1995, I finally found out what the problem was. That children raised in poverty, before they get to school, what's happening? What? Oh, he's on time. That's a friendly bat. This is a big point. See, you remember this. Long time from then, that Gary got up there and to speak, and the bats even came out. There's bats in his belfry. So, everybody's seen a bat, right? But you haven't seen one flying around the gym. But you see them outside, right? So, let's go on. So, I don't have much time. So, there's children raised in poverty, before they get to school, listen to 12 million words. Children raised in all of our homes listen to 42 million words, and there's a 30 million word deficit. And so all of a sudden I understood. I didn't understand. Even though I was testing kids and working with them, I didn't understand what the real problem was. They didn't have that basic foundation in stories. Basic foundation in stories teach you judgment, they teach you understanding, they teach you vocabulary, because it all fits together in a story. It makes sense. It makes sense of the world, your life. And so we began a journey, and I got up with a group of people in Richmond, Virginia, and we attracted some attention. We got the state school board involved, we got the governor involved, we got the Library of Virginia gave us $100,000 to do some research and seeing how we could impact those children. And so in 2003, in 2000, a study came out about family literacy, and this study says that children benefit from family literacy. All this hundreds of millions of dollars shows that children's achievement increases, they attend school more regularly, general knowledge. You know, every day we have trivia questions. I talked to a principal in Elizabeth City, which is 98% minority, which is not like y'all, but he says, you know, when we do the trivia questions in the morning, I read them twice on the PA at 8:30. And if you're not there, you can't put your name in the hat box, because we choose prizes every day. And said, it's unbelievable. All the children come to school, and it's about a book. They just, and they show up one time because they want to participate in the trivia question. So it creates a big hubbub. Family literacy, your families, parents, persistent family literacy programs, it benefits in hundreds of millions of dollars. Families learn to value education, and family literacy has a positive effect on low school achievement, teen parenting, the last one, home and community violence, social alienation. So this is a little video. I'm gonna skip that one. that's too much. Bats, and then you blow out your eardrums. So anyway, you'll find out all about One District, One Book. But as it so turns out, remember I told you that school system I worked in, I watched all these third grade slide outs? Basically, for the high stakes testing at that school system, 5 out of 10 third graders passed the SOL reading test. It's a big deal. 5 out of 10. So I went back to that school system and worked for 2 more years. And I knew everybody. Clint Staples was the superintendent. And I said, Clint, I think I found an answer to some of the third grade slide outs. He said, no way. We had problem solved. But anyway, so I said, let's try this One District, One Book program. First time we'd ever tried it. But I did it in my school system. It was fun. Those kids at the elementary schools, you could talk to them about the book. And it was amazing that everybody participated. The at-risk students participated because everybody was doing it. So we waited a few years before we checked the SOLs from the state to find out if it had any impact on the reading scores. There it is. That was the county. This was the SO. Before we tried the program, high Title I, 5 out of 10. After the first year, 8 out of 10 third graders passed. And then the last 2 years that we charted this, 9 out of 10. So those kids all of a sudden got interested in books and stories and understood vocabulary. It had an amazing impact. How's my time doing? About there? About done? Okay, the bat took up how much time? You know, this is my favorite graph. This is my favorite. We came up, read to them. I didn't come up with it. I came up with the idea. But I'm speaking to you today as community leaders. You're teachers. Some of you are elementary teachers and some are secondary teachers. But you're community leaders. And you're taking this program out into the community because the parents of Great Bend trust you with their most prized possession, their children. And so you can spread this throughout the community. It's a wonderful program, and it surrounds the child with literacy, where some children have never experienced this. The parents get involved, and I mean the parents, the grandparents Skype in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and read the book along with their families, their children. The great-grandparents, peer pressure. The 5th graders reading the book, and the 2nd grader, they look up to those 5th graders. You know what they call the book in Connecticut? They came up with a name. They call it the Right Book because everybody's doing it. Not the special ed kids, not everybody's doing it. So they call it the Right Book. And this is a wonderful program. We have great schools. This is just a piece of the puzzle that complements all the wonderful things you're doing. I'm going to skip that one because I'm about done, really. I mean, I don't want to take up somebody else's time. This thing is about done, too. Okay. Maybe I don't push it hard enough. And you're getting your community. I want to put this elementary teacher's mind at rest. There's nothing you have to do. Nada. You know, my wife is a retired teacher, and you sit through these things, and they say, well, you have to do a few things, and then you get back, and you have to do about 5 different things. There's no lesson plans. The biggest word we have is fun. Just like y'all starting with the mask, it's fun. You want parents and kids to have fun. It's not work. I'll tell you, I'll end on this 3 stories, okay? One school, Jarvisburg Elementary. And I know the principal there, Steve Blackstock. They did the One District, One Book program. And so Steve, I went down to see him and I said, got any stories, Steve? He said, yeah, I've got a couple. I said, I'm traveling around talking about it, give me them. So he said, we had a parent-teacher night right after we did the book. And I was sitting in my office, heard a knock on my door. I looked up and there was a mom And she was one of those moms I couldn't get in. Her daughter was in the 5th grade. I couldn't get her into school. She's one of those ones that stayed away from school. And she said, Mr. Blackstock, I came by to thank you. He said, okay, thank me. She said, you know, we read that book. We just finished, they read the Trump of the Swan. We finished Trump of the Swan, and we love that book. And you know, my daughter in the 5th grade, I hadn't read a book to her since before she entered school. And we connected with that book. And we had fun every night. And my son, you know, he's hyperactive, he's on Ritalin, he can't sit still. He sat still, and then he said, read another chapter, Mom, read another chapter. So we're ready for another book, she said. Here's the rest of the story, Gary. That mother's incarcerated on weekends, and the father is an illiterate waterman, and that son is a major problem, and she's coming into my office thanking me. Same night, another knock on the door. There's a 3rd grade parent, single parent. She comes in, and she's got the book in her hand. She says, you get the English edition, I can't read Spanish. She said, Mr. Blackstock, my daughter brought home this book. And I looked at that book, and there were so many words on the page. And I really didn't know what to do. Because my daughter said, you have to read it. We're doing this book. Everybody's doing it, Mom, everybody. You have to read it. So I sat down and I started reading it. She said, and you know, my daughter knew some words I didn't know. We finished the book. It was great. Thank you. A couple days later, one of our thousands of schools, a bus driver comes in. She's been driving the bus for 25 years. She called Mr. Blackstock, Steve, of course. She said, Steve, I want to tell you something. I've been driving for 25 years and y'all are doing this book. And I'm reading, and my granddaughter asked me to read it to her. Said her mom was busy or whatever. So I read the first chapter, and then I got on the bus in the morning. Every kid on the bus was talking about that book. It was a kids' book club on the bus. So I started talking about the book. Every day we talked about the book. We had so much fun. She said, I've been driving the bus for 25 years, and I've been transporting kids. Now I'm part of their education. So it brought her into it. The rest of the story there is her husband has cancer, and so he has to have radiation treatments. So she has to miss 3 days. The substitute bus driver comes in, and on the seat is a copy of the book with the three chapters they're reading with how to lead the discussion on the bus. So she left lesson plans for the bus driver. Thank you.